All right. I see the live button, so here we go. Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of Balancing the Conversation. Balancing the Conversation is a series of conversations promoting open discourse on critical issues surrounding COVID-19. My name is Luisana Valadez. I'm a certified holistic nutritionist and founder of Nourished. Our last episode, we had a conversation with Dr. Syed Haider, who is a frontline doctor actively treating COVID patients. We had him here to talk about his firsthand experience during the pandemic. And there were many viewers who are not living in the locations where the mentioned treatments are readily available. And people want to know, what can I do to prevent, whether medications or natural remedies, but before we can tackle that, we have to talk about the dilemma that Muslim doctors currently face, which is the Islamic tradition has an entire system of medical treatment and a strong historical track record. But what we want to know is, does it have a place today? When newer approaches and technologies are available, how can doctors reconcile their faith with their practice? I'm joined today by Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamid Ali. He's an associate professor at Zaytuna College in Berkeley, California, and the founding director of Lamppost Education Initiative, as well as Dr. Mazen Atassi, who is a naturopathic doctor and founder of Forward to Health. And today we are going to attempt to solve the Muslim doctor's dilemma, inshallah. And before we get started, I'd like to ask Sheikh Abdullah to please start us off with the dua.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala ashir al-anbiya نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. اللهم أصلح لنا شأننا كله لا إله إلا أنت وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.
All right, thank you so much, Sheikh. So for the first question, it's going to be for Dr. Mazen. So to introduce us to all of this, can you define traditional medicine for us? What is traditional medicine?
Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So I would define traditional medicine as being the medicine that existed in the world prior to modernity and the appearance of technological, industrial, pharmaceutical medicine. Now, there were different systems that were available to the world at the time, pre-modernity, and there was a lot of eclectic types of practice and crystallizations of holistic traditional medical philosophy. So you have what we call, for example, the wisdom traditions. You have like Ayurveda in India, and you have TCM in China, and you have Unani Tib in the Muslim world, and so forth. And I guess you can say all of those were traditional systems of medicine, and they still are existent today. I think I personally like to use holistic rather than traditional because it speaks more to it describes the medicine more than just being something that we know existed in the history books, right? But this holistic vitalism, I like to call this traditional philosophy of medicine holistic vitalism, because that's really the common thread you'll find through all these different traditions. That's what we're talking about when we talk about traditional medicine. And really every single medicine except modern conventional medicine is in some way holistic and vitalistic. Anything that's rooted. Now, any Joe Schmo can come and make up a medicine and say they're traditional. Talking about time-tested, rooted, legitimate, holistic systems of medicine, which in some way I consider them like madahib of medicine, right? There's like Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, which is like holistic vitalism. And then you have like the Hanafis and you have the Shafi'is and so forth. So you have your Ayurveda and you have your homeopathy and so forth. But they're all kind of within the fold, right? Because they practice holistic vitalism, right? So for example, like in naturopathic medicine, which is what I believe and it's kind of like the most kind of modern attempt at promoting hikmah, wisdom in the modern age, you'll find that there's these same 6 principles that are recognized traditionally, packaged and formulated and operationalized today. So for example, the 6 principles really quickly, I can't help myself. Number 1, first, do no harm. You can't do harm when you treat people. You can't make it worse, right? And there's different ways that can happen, and we should be able to talk about that. But first, do no harm is the first principle. This is the Hippocratic principle. So any doctor that treats according to the Hippocratic oath, which we all take, allopaths take it, osteopaths take it, naturopaths take it, homeopaths take it. Everyone takes it. There's meaning to that. It's not just this sloganism. It's not just this, hurrah, hurrah kind of thing that we do and say, and to signify our initiation into the healing arts. Like it carries meaning more so after the fact than it does before, or even during the attestation or testament of that promise to do no harm. Because it's really in clinical practice that it shows up, right? Not when you're learning in school and stuff like that. Anyways, number 2 is the doctrine of the vital force, right? What we call in Latin the vis medicatrix naturae, the healing power of nature, the vital force. Ruh al-haywani. Again, maybe we alluded to this earlier. Chi, prana, orgone energy, elan vital, physis, which is the original word for the word physician. Physis is this life force. The physician is one who worked with the life force. Not so much nowadays, but traditionally, physis was like chi, or vital force again. So what we believe in the doctrine of vitalism is that life is created and animated and supported, and as well as health and disease, by this immaterial force. That's basic vitalism, that there exists something beyond the material. And as Muslims, talking about what is the Muslim doctor dilemma, this is kind of the crux of the issue, isn't it? Do we believe in the immaterial? Do we believe in the ghaib? Do we believe in the ruh or not? Is it just something abstract and removed from reality, removed from your clinical practice? Or is it something that you live, you breathe, that you can see, you can begin to actually experience within yourself and clinically with your patients? Right? So this is the doctrine of vitalism. And then you have treating the whole patient. Number 3, number 4, treating the root causes, right? Tolle causum and tolle totum in Latin. Preventare, which is prevention. And then docere, which is the word that comes from doctor, which is to teach. The doctor is teacher, doctor as one who cultivates and edifies the people, the patients, right? So traditional medicine is holistic medicine, and there's these common threads, these common principles that tie it all together, right? Traditional medicine, in some way, I have to say it, it's not these myths of the old. It's not asatir al-awwalin, right, as the Quranic kind of frame. It's not these old myths of the ancients, right? It's a living teaching. It's a living tradition. It's not maybe as prominent as it was in its heyday, but it's certainly still existent today, and something that I believe remains the position from doctors at a philosophical level, as well as clinical and in praxis.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So that covers the 6. They're called the 6 principles. Can you repeat that for everyone who's watching?
Yeah. So first, do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Primum non nocere. And then you have number 2 principle, which is the vis medicatrix naturae, the healing power of nature, the vital force. This is the doctrine of vitalism, which I focus a lot on in my work, my teachings. Number 3, tolle totum, treating the totality, treating the whole. Tolle causum, treating the underlying causes of disease, not just the symptoms, which is huge, right? I mean, these are huge. This is a huge criterion, It's a furqan here. This is furqan in medicine. I'm not talking about theologically. Prevention and doctor as teacher being number 6. So number 5 is prevention. Number 6 is doctor as teacher.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Sheikh Abdullah, what are sources for learning traditional medicine?
Well, I mean, of course, that question about sources, Dr. Mazen naturally can answer that more appropriately. I mean, because I'm in a different field, but I'm assuming you mean by sources, you mean sort of Islamic sources.
Yeah. So is it science, or revelation? Is what I'm kind of alluding to here.
Well, yeah. So you're talking about, of course, we would sort of call sources. I would probably think that what you mean by this is what we generally would call asbab al-ilm, or these sources of knowledge, or we say are epistemological foundations. Where does knowledge originate? And I think that this is something universal which can be applied across sciences. And so when we talk about perceiving what is real, right? Because this is the ultimate goal, right, of any science, and perceiving what is real, what is true, right, with respect to a science. And so natural science is concerned with what we generally would call sort of objective reality, right? And so without having the proper understanding of objective reality, then when you pass a legal judgment about a thing, then naturally it will be erroneous, right? Because you didn't perceive or apprehend things as they truly are, right? But we generally say that it begins with direct sensate experience, right? The five senses. So a direct experience, and then of course the brain processes information, and the intellect itself is looked upon as being its own sort of source of knowledge with respect to abstract ideas or things which are abstracted, of course, from the mind out into the world, or from the world back into the mind. And so the Imam al-Nasafi, he mentions it was called the al-hawas al-salima, and then al-aql, which is we call reason, and then thirdly al-khabar sadiq, which was called can be determined or translated as corroborated reports which have been corroborated as true. In other words, that we can achieve or acquire knowledge through direct experience, or through someone else's direct experience. But the question, when it comes from someone else's direct experience, at least their claimed direct experience, their integrity is extremely important. Their moral integrity, and then their professional, knowledge, we would say, their expert knowledge, or among other things, how good is their memory, among other issues. So that sort of becomes the foundation of us being able to rule that something is actually true or something's actually real. And this is the most objective ways that we have come to know that. Now, with respect to the third of these epistemological bases that we include among the corroborated reports, miraculous events, right? So, for instance, the prophets, alayhim salatu wasalam, that they come to us with claims, that Allah sent me, Allah, He gave me the book, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants you to do this and not to do this. And we accept the claim because of the mu'jizat, so the miracles. And so they corroborate the claim, because fundamentally the messenger says that if you think that I'm a liar, then why don't you do the same that I have done, right? Why don't you reproduce the miracle itself, right? So for Muslims, we believe, again, in the immaterial, we believe in the metaphysical. And I think that this is something missed by so many people today, in particular Muslims, and many of those working in the medical field, in that you get the impression that Muslims don't believe that dua, for instance, actually can work, right? Now it may not work for most people, right? But again, it depends on your level of conviction, right? But if you have conviction, this is part of our aqidah, right? This is part of our aqidah, that words have meaning, right? And even if you don't believe that words have meaning, we know that you can prove that words have meaning, right? I remember an example that Sheikh Hamza had mentioned a couple of times about how there was a man who had said that to someone that he saw someone praying, and he said that, well, why are you wasting your time with words? Words mean nothing, right? And then the man who was praying turned to this other and started to insult him, and the man became angry. And so he said to him, well, why are you angry? And he said, because of what you said. He says, well, you just said that words have no meaning. Right? So it's really interesting to see this. And also I would say before, of course, I want to hear more from Dr. Mazen, is that what fascinates me about human history is that human beings have actually have have had a consistent stream of intercultural exchange, right? That the Muslims benefit from the Greeks, the non-Muslims benefit from the Muslims, et cetera, et cetera. All peoples have benefited from one another. And so when we even talk about medicine itself and traditional or holistic medicine, that we're not talking about something that originates in one place, right? But it does speak of a somewhat united perspective and outlook and paradigm that existed in the pre-modern period, and that people saw the human being as part of nature, and also the unquantifiable, those things that cannot be quantified, like emotions and thoughts and appetites, as part of nature, right? And it's because they're in the realm of the immaterial. So, but then the modern period set in, and all of a sudden we exclude these things from nature, right? And so because we only want to be able to study the things that are quantifiable, or the things we consider to be objective. And so there is definitely a major challenge that we face today, because so many people have bought into the idea that the only thing that is real are the things that we can taste, we can touch, we can smell, we can hear, or we can see, right? And that has to be challenged over and over and over.
So you mentioned other prophets, and you also mentioned other cultures, and so a question I have, just to clarify for viewers, is traditional medicine specific to our religion, to Islam, or would previous prophets have been sent with medicine as well?
I think it's fairly obvious that it would be that it was sent, that they themselves embrace what was common as remedies during the past. But there's good reason to also believe that many of those particular practices were corroborated by the messengers themselves practicing them. But so, for instance, I mean, we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on one occasion, a man came to him complaining, saying, "Oh, my brother's stomach is ill," right? Some say it meant, or he had diarrhea, for instance, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells the man, "Go tell him to take honey," and then he goes and he takes it. It doesn't work, and then it happens a few different times. Till eventually, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells the man, he said that the prophet of God has spoken the truth, and your brother's stomach has lied, right? And then once the man used it the next time, then the honey actually worked and cured his ailment, right? So now, of course, that may not necessarily mean that for whatever ailment he actually had, that honey is the solution in every single situation, right? But again, the whole point being that here's an example of the Prophet ﷺ recommending a medical treatment, and very certain that is going to work, right? So it's not, and this is not like when he passes by the Sahaba and they're trying to pollinate the date palm tree, and then he makes a suggestion, and then it doesn't work, and then when they come back and say, "Well, it fell apart, it didn't work, Ya Rasulullah," and he said, "Well, what are you asking me for?" I said, "Well, you said this." He said, "Well, I was just making a suggestion. You know better about the affairs of your dunya, right? But this is a different situation." So the Prophet ﷺ, he's certain that this will work, right? Is it working because of some particular qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed within honey, or was it miraculous, or is it a combination of both? But we do know that there are many different benefits from honey.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I have a follow-up question for Dr. Mazen, kind of to add in here. So are there similarities with other medical systems being practiced today? So like what Sheikh Abdullah was talking about right now, are there similarities in modern day being used?
In modern day? Yeah.
Yeah. So similarities with other medical systems being practiced.
Sure,
today.
of course there are. Yeah. Again, all of them that are rooted in this traditional holistic root bed are like from the same family, right? So they're going to have maybe different approaches. So for example, like you find in Tib Yunani, in Islamic medicine, and in Ayurveda, there's a huge emphasis on diet and lifestyle. Huge, right? They're really not known to have a specific type of interventionism. They focus more on diet, lifestyle, and maybe some herbs. And we have hijama, right? Whereby you kind of like TCM, Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, and Western herbalism. They use herbs a lot, right? That's what they use. and they use them in different ways. And there's different philosophies and how to use them and how to mix them. And there's the simples and there's complex and compound. And you have like acupuncture and homeopathy, which work differently as well. They work with the vital force. Acupuncture tries to allow the, support the flow of qi in the body, finding where it's stuck and putting needles or pressure and facilitating the flow of qi, which restores the function of the body. Homeopathy does that as well. So there's different resonances depending on the specific kind of school, madhab, approach, but they all share, again, the same principles and same understanding of the human being as this amalgamation, this mazj of ruh, jism, nafs, of spirit, body, mind, spirit, if you will, and that there's a vital force and that there's root causes and that the body is always inclining towards balance and that there's, wrong ways of eating and drinking and sleeping and moving and thinking and being with others and relating that can move you out of balance, and that by restoring the fitra and much of the sunnah medicines, if you will, of Tibb al-Nabawi are trying to restore this fitri balance with ourselves and with nature, right? It's not so much interventionist as opposed to just live right. Just live centered, right? Practice this middle way and you will be well, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that's the way of a lot of other traditions, and other people use more interventions. And in naturopathic medicine today, it's called the Universalist school. So I love it so much because in some way it shares the exact same principles, but then it zooms out macro and it says, okay, so I see these people doing herbs and working at this level, and I see these people working at lifestyle, working on this level, and I see people doing herbs to suppress symptoms at this level, and everyone's kind of operating from a different perspective, but coming from the same place. And the traditional holistic, vitalistic naturopaths, not all naturopaths are vitalistic, they try to see the whole and try to understand the therapeutic order and a type of holism to the holistic approach. Right? It gets kind of meta that way, but in some way, they're trying to understand the hikmah of the diversity in practice, and there's something important there. So yeah, in a nutshell, definitely things that you can see that are shared. And even like, for example, acupuncture is not just 3,000, 5,000 now years old. The Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine is about 3,000 BC, so 5,000 years ago. But you have, and you can look this up, Otzi the Iceman. Have you heard of Otzi the Iceman? It was this body that was found in the Alps, and it's estimated to go back to 5,000 BC. And what's really amazing is he was like frozen in ice, so he was kind of mummified and preserved. They found him buried with herbs, a bunch of herbs used for GI issues, right? Probably, it seems like parasites and stuff like that. But more interestingly, he had tattoos. He had tattoos drawn on his body, on his limbs and stuff like that, that corroborate exactly with acupuncture meridians. Exactly, right? And he was using needles and he was using pressure, whatever, to treat himself. How did they have that knowledge? And even you can look it up on the Smithsonian magazine online or Science. They did some articles about it. It's there. Otzi, O-T-Z-I, the Iceman, right? So this is something that is deep, and there was a lot of that cross-pollination, that stream of cultural, giving and receiving that the Sheikh was talking about earlier. That was happening for a long time. We don't know what the ancients had.
Right.
I mean, we really don't know what like people like Ad and Thamud had, like deep knowledge. But that's just an example. That's just one example. That 5,200 BC, this man was hiking in the Alps, and he had herbs with him, and he had acupuncture meridians tattooed on his body.
Wow, that's incredible. So Sheikh Abdullah, what is the hukum on medicine? I guess a more precise question is, does a life and death situation change how we can use medicine? It's a bit unrelated, but we're kind of...
No, it's an important question. I mean, of course, there are two ways to take the question. I mean, one part of the one way to phrase the question perhaps would be, what is the ruling of studying medicine or the ways of treating the human body. And so that the answer to that is very easy, which is that it's what the ulama generally call fard kifaya, a communal obligation. There needs to be those in our community who know how to treat the human body, right? We need to have doctors, right, in the community. So not everyone needs to be a doctor, but some of us need to be doctors. The other way you can phrase the question would be, what does a Muslim, or is a Muslim obligated to take medicine if their life is in danger, right? If they find their life to be in danger. And the ulama generally say that the individual, right, has the option to refuse treatment, right? That no one should be forced or compelled to take medicine. You're not even supposed to force feed an individual, right? Especially if they're sick. If the sick person doesn't want to eat, you're not allowed to force feed that individual. Now, if the person finds him herself in a situation where the only way for them to survive is for them to take something, and they're 100% certain that this is the thing that's going to save their lives, then that's a different question altogether. So imagine a person who is starving to death, right? And you take, you only thing available is something which is haram, right? Which may harm you long term, and so naturally, that's permitted for you to eat in that situation, right? But that is a little bit different from the issue of taking medicine, because now we're talking about you're sick. I'm actually sick right now, right? And I fear that if I don't take this medicine, or someone tells me that if I don't take this medicine, then I'm going to die, right? Are you sinful? And I would say, no, you're not, because there's less certainty, especially if you're talking about something experimental, like we're talking about right now today with respect to COVID, that there's no guarantee, one, that particular treatment is going to save your life, and if anything, the treatment potentially could harm you, right? So it's not a simple a formula of, okay, well, hey, that you might die, and the only way for you to live or survive is for you to take this vaccine or jab, whatever you choose to call it. That in itself is a false equivalency. That the analogy is not an equal analogy, because you're talking about something totally new, something whose long-term effects we are unaware of, something which is only one of many possible remedies to the person's ailments. Right, and also, it could potentially harm you, right? So, and I would imagine that this sort of like is the way that reason you asked the question is to sort of get us to talk about this particular issue that we've been speaking about for a very long time now. For a number of conversations, we've been talking about this issue with respect to the vaccines. And I just want to make clear that my personal issue is not so much with people deciding to inject themselves with foreign substances, right? If they want to do that, be my guest, right? My objection is to people who believe that I have no right to refuse taking these things and play these foreign things into my body. I say, if I don't want to put it in my body, I have every right not to put it in my body. And to be told by Muslim leaders that a Muslim has no valid reason to receive a religious exemption, it is totally just outrageous and ridiculous in my opinion. So, and this is fundamentally what we see happening in certain parts of the world.
Okay, thank you for that. So, I guess a follow-up question for that is, it's kind of related.
Mm-hmm.
Can a role of medicine be so overstated? And medicine as what we're seeing today, you know what I mean? Not necessarily what Dr. Mazen was and you were alluding to earlier, but can the role of medicine be so overstated to the point that it becomes a form of shirk, idolatry, or for those who don't speak Arabic?
Yeah, sure, it could. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. And your faith in the medicine, the created thing, is so significant that you even ignore and dismiss the possibility of some other means, right, which is a more direct appeal to the creator, right, like dua, like supplication, as being a remedy as well, then of course you entered into the realm of shirk. I mean, it's if you believe that if I pray 5 times a day and I fast Ramadan, that there's a guarantee that Allah has to give me Jannah, regardless of anything, because that in itself compels him to give me Jannah, then that in itself is a gross understanding, to say the least, right? A misunderstanding, to say the least, right? And this is fundamentally what people are doing when they say, well, listen, forget all of that dua stuff, forget all that tawakkul stuff, forget all that, the dhikr and everything. Listen, leave it alone. You know, the only way out of this is for us to inject ourselves with some experimental agent, right, which has no long-term studies proving what it does to you. And then also it actually doesn't work for a very long time, right? And the vast majority of people don't actually even need it because, you know, they're healthy enough to withstand being infected by COVID-19 and they'll survive, right? You understand? Then that in itself borders on, if not is, what I would call idolatry, right? You know, so you're worshiping the medicine. You know, it's not Allah making the medicine work. It's the medicine making itself work. The medicine has the inherent power to cure you. It said, no, it does not. Even normal pills that we take is the same thing. Our attitude is that they work through Allah's will, right? You know, that in the, you know, even when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about sihr in the Quran, about a sorcery, you know, he talks about the angels came and they taught the people, and then says, and they will not harm anyone with it except by Allah's permission. Right? So in other words, sihr itself is from the asbab, is a cause for an effect. It is, however, it only works because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, work. And if he doesn't want it to work, he says, don't work. Right. And again, one last thing I'll say before I conclude is that let's be clear. When you die when you're supposed to die. Right. You know, so I know that there's a lot of argumentation back and forth on social media about vaccines or being pro-vax, being anti-vax, you know, but the issue is not so much about, you know, whether or not the vaccine will kill you or if COVID would kill you. That itself should totally be, you know, placed at a distance from our minds when it comes to these debates. Because when you die, regardless of the situation, of the cause, you die because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it is time to go. Right? But the issue that we're concerned with is the question of whether or not we should be exposing ourselves to potential harm, right? You know, what if I don't die? That's really the question, is that what if I take this and I don't die, but something else happens much more that makes my life difficult for me, right? And causes me significant pain or pain to a family member or a child. You understand? That's really what the question is all about. And then you tell me that I'm obligated to take it. No, I'm not obligated to take it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is such an important piece. Alhamdulillah. So, Dr. Mazen, okay, so we have a great scholars of our time, like, for example, Ibn Sina. Everybody knows him as a great physician, but he was also an astronomer. He was also a thinker. He was also a writer, right? So the question for me is here, did only doctors practice medicine?
Did only doctors practice medicine? Yeah, it wasn't like we think now. There weren't medical schools back then as much. Maybe, I mean, the Muslims probably were of the early people to kind of institutionalize the education process, systems of education in the world. But traditionally, medicine was always an apprenticeship. Even today, I would contend that the schools are not sufficient. Many schools, even naturopathic schools, are not sufficient oftentimes to bring the practitioner to a level of reliability, of efficiency, of aptitude. Because in medical schools, even today, naturopathic and allopathic, both, there's a type of quantitative kind of assessment. You get this knowledge, you regurgitate it, and then you move on, and then you do that for 4 years. There's no actual like ethical, clinical kind of apprenticeship anymore, which was the asl, which was the foundation, right? The ijaza didn't come from you just going through the ringer. Ijaza came because you were ready to be the hakim, right? You showed competency in multiple levels, including moral and so forth. And so, yes, of course, many people could have been doctors if they found like the neighborhood doctor who was accomplished and had sanad and all of that. You could have just spent time with him, probably spent your life with him, or his life at least. But you would have been his apprentice or her apprentice, and you would have learned from them and taken from them in state, just like in other ulum. Remember, this is one of the sacred knowledges. You would take from them in state and knowledge. You would live with them. You'd see how they ate. You'd see how they prepared medicines. You'd see their patient, the way they conducted their relationships, right? Their family life, their inner life, so forth. And so it was this like really rich type of transmission that was happening. And you did not have to go to a school and get a degree and have the whole hat and the gown and all that to become a doctor. And in fact, many of the ulama were also doctors. So all the books on Tibb al-Nabawi that we have today, at least the ones that are widely known and familiar to us, like by Ibn Qayyim, Sheikh Ibn Qayyim, you have Suyuti, right? All wrote on Tibb al-Nabawi and others. And so these are polymaths. These are people of allamas, not just ulama, allamas in the highest regard. Hufad of hadith, 100,000 hadith with chains, not hufad of Quran, hufad of hadith and ulum Quran and fiqh, right? Probably maybe multiple madahib, and they have ifta, and all of this huge and spiritually accomplished, and they would be hakims.
Yeah.
Accomplished hakims. So it was a part of the training. It was a part of what it meant to be. Imam al-Ghazali also, I mean, it's known that he was very well versed in medicine. He had issue with dissection, but what he would, on fiqhi grounds, but what he would do is he'd find people that were okay with it, probably mostly the Mu'tazila, and they were cutting up bodies and dissecting in their schools and analyzing the body and trying to find and place function and structure. And so he'd just come and peek over their shoulders, it's reported. He'd just come and learn. I'm not cutting, but since you're cutting, let me have a look and see what's going on here and how things are working. And he has a treatise on like the wonder. It's like a spiritual reflection. Look at the science of Imam al-Ghazali. Right? He studies the science of the human body, and then he says, look at how amazing proportions of the hands. He said the hand was the most amazing thing. But look at the hands. Look at the shapes of the ears and the eyes and how they bend light and how they can bring sound in, and the mouth and the teeth and the chewing and the muscles of chewing, the muscles of mastication, and the different types of hair on the body. He even went so far like the hair on the beard is different than the hair on the head, the hair on the eyebrows, the hair on the body is different, and there's meaning to all of that. And he expounded on that. Right? Science was spiritual. Science brought him to a closer relationship with the Creator, Jalla Jalaluh. And so it was part of our culture. It was part of our tradition. Even in this country, at the beginning of the previous century, it was not uncommon for a household to have a stock cabinet of herbs, of homeopathy, pellets or liquids, to have a working knowledge of herbs and foods that they would grow in the back and grow and cook and prepare for their meals. Like mothers basically were many hakimas. Like there was a working knowledge, like a fard ayn knowledge of this. Right? So it wasn't just for the doctors. Everyone had access to it. It wasn't this ivory tower thing, right? We're the experts, and you kiss our hands, and maybe we'll drop down knowledges and medicines for you if you're good boys and good girls. Everyone got it. If you wanted more, you can spend more time with it. But everyone knew really how to eat and eat with the seasons, and I mean, it was easier back then because you only had access to the food that was seasonal. It wasn't this globalism going on. So, and a lot of things a lot easier back then too, right?
So would you say that the early Muslim doctors, did they follow science? Kind of going with our theme here.
Did they follow science?
Yes. Did they follow
Again,
science?
well, yeah, no, see, and that's again to repeat what we said last time. They didn't follow science, they used science. They applied science, right? They didn't follow, like, believe, like, this is our ideology and we're going to follow you like good believers. It wasn't like that, right? Like, again, just for those maybe that missed last week, you can go back to that one, episode 4, was it? But it was, they used science as a tool, as a method of inquiry to study the human body. They would find knowledge. They would find somebody was doing, acupuncture, right? I'm sure the Muslims at some point interface with TCM and acupuncture. That's really interesting. Or yoga qigong. That's really interesting. How does that work? They would study it. They'd learn about that, and they'd bring it in, right? That's science, curiosity, openness.
So would you say that at their core?
As long as
So would you say that at their core, are doctors supposed to be scientists?
At their core, they're supposed to be scientists. If it means to be curious, if it means to be investigative, to observe the quantitative and the qualitative, try to understand the hikmah of Allah Ta'ala in creation, the inner workings of things, the interconnectedness of things, the synergy of all that exists, right? The old Hakims, they would teach by taking students into the forest. And they would say, study the forest. If you study the forest and the inner workings of everything in the forest, you will understand the human being, right? And so you have to be able to be open to study this. It's not just this rote knowledge. Give me this book of protocols, right? Which is what, unfortunately, I'm not here to, raise allopathic medicine to the ground, right? As easy as that can be sometimes to do that, and tempting. I'm not trying to do that. The healer has to heal, right? The healer heals. We want to heal the paradigm. We don't want to force change. We don't want to knock it over, right? But like these are things that we have to be able to speak to. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I going on about right before I said that?
We can go to a quick Q&A.
Yeah,
so there's a question here. Can you see it on the screen?
Yes.
Right. So the question is, should we take the means to protect ourselves from the virus and also to prevent harming others since it is contagious? Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, take the means. Take the means to protect yourself from the virus and also to prevent harming others since it is contagious. Virus, right? But any of these microorganisms are inherently contagious. They're made to spread. Allah designed them to spread and become pervasive. So it's not really notable that it's contagious. That's what viruses do. Its MO is to spread as vastly as possible. And it meets resistance, it's going to mutate and then continue to spread. And it spread. And then there's resistance, and then it'll mutate again and spread until it becomes endemic. Okay? So in the meantime, we're all going to interface with it at some point, most likely, at some point. Most of us, if not all of us. And most of us probably already have. Allahu A'lam. Things like that. So we need to be able to, strengthen yourself. That's the way. You're not going to avoid it. You can't avoid it. You can't avoid a coronavirus that's almost nearing endemic status, You can't avoid it. The precautions are you take care of yourself to strengthen your constitution. That's the preparation. That's the main preparation. The main preparation is that you strengthen your gut health. You work on diet and lifestyle. You work on supporting physiological processes. So if that means you have to take a little bit of medicine, some herbs, something targeted, safe, natural, that works with the body, it's bioavailable, and side effect to it, then do that. Right, you want to strengthen, and Hakim can do that. A good holistic, vitalistic practitioner of any school can do that in their approach. Some are better than others in different things, but that's basically anyone who's good at what they do. Any of the madhahib of vitalistic medicine could help with that. right? Acupuncture has been really helpful. Homeopathy has been really helpful. People have been taking herbs since the beginning and staying strong, right? Working on their gut, healing the gut lining. The gut and the immune system are totally connected.
Absolutely.
It's one system, really. It's not even to say it as in two different ways, and like to use two different names for it is actually kind of a misnomer. Right? It's not appropriate in some ways. It's the exact same thing.
Right.
The entire immune system is in the microbiome, more or less. It's turned on and off by the microbiome, which is this vast ecosystem in the gut.
Absolutely.
Right?
So
Trillions of
focusing
bacteria,
on-
of viruses, of parasites, so forth.
Yes. So we have another question here. So this is from Sister Fozia. She says, I wonder how illness and its process of potential detoxification and mode of spiritual awareness and purification might be viewed as positive.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So in naturopathic philosophy, which is to say, again, vitalistic philosophy, all acute illness is a cleansing process. It's a cleansing process, right? And you'll see this with all types of flus, all types of colds, coughs, fevers of all sorts. It's a cleansing process because in some way the body is mounting that response. It's not the virus causing those symptoms. The virus doesn't cause. Again, all expression is curated in the body through the vital force. And it is a response to the environment. It's responding constantly to the environment. So when the body wants to ramp up a fever because there's a threat and there's some sort of infection going on, right? That means that there was a weakness that happened and the bug or something got in and began to colonize. Okay, so now what does it do? It ramps up naturally the body temperature and begins to galvanize its forces, its immune forces, its antibodies, its B cells, plasma cells, T cells. All these things are coming now, and they work more efficiently when there's a little bit more heat. So now you understand that's the body responding, right, and eventually getting to a type of discharge, usually through cough, for example, like with COVID, there's been a lot of coughing. It's discharging. People get diarrhea as well at the end of their acute illness, which is good. Again, discharging or sweating or emotional releases. There's always a discharge at the end of an acute illness somehow. At least it should be. But all of that is a response to the trigger, the environmental trigger, right? And so in some way, yes, it's totally a purification. Even the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the teaching that when you go visit the ill, what would he say? He'd say, tuhurun, inshallah. It's a purification, right? It's an expiation. It's a cleansing. So we take that clinically as well, physiologically, and we understand that the body, in some way, when it's sick, it's actually cleansing. And you'll find, and this is going maybe a little bit more too deep, but we'll find that I do a lot more with chronic cases. I work with chronic disease more. I do acute as well. I've treated COVID, but I work more with chronic illnesses. And but you find that when you begin to really heal chronic issues, the person becomes acutely ill. They'll get a fever, they'll get some aggravation of some sort. And it's actually the body finally getting strong enough to mount a response. If that makes sense. I wish I could see people, but in some way, the chronic state is a low energy state. It's a low health state. And as you build health, the body's ramping up its capacity and its resilience and its capacity to mete out a response that's appropriate for bringing the body back into balance. So once it's strong enough, it'll mount this fever. Person becomes ill. Oh my God, I'm getting worse. No, it's actually a good thing. You actually just stay with it. You need to rest 2 weeks, take off, hydrotherapy, maybe fast a little bit. I take out food intolerances to establish the hemia properly, which is the proper diet, individualized diet. I use herbs and homeopathics. And then once they're out of that, they can reach a level of health they were never able to previously. And I would argue, and vitalists argue, that if that acute process was to be stunted, they'd be forced back into their chronic state. They need to go through that acute illness to get to the higher state.
Wow.
It's like a fitna. It's literally like a fitna. Like from maqam, if you want to spiritually increase, we ask Allah Ta'ala to be gentle with us, but oftentimes Allah wants something good for us, and our nafs is, has a grip on us, and so He'll give us a little nudge, and there's a little bit of a fever spiritually, and there's qabt and constriction, all of that, and we're placed in a state, but then we come out of that at a higher place spiritually, right? more spiritually healthy. Same clinically, right?
That's
So
amazing.
is it a purification? Is it spiritual? Absolutely. In both regards, 100%.
That's amazing. That's a really, really good explanation. It's just so beautiful how the physical is always also a spiritual occurrence, right? It's so beautiful. So I guess moving on to a different topic, I wanted to talk a little bit about modern medicine. So how would we describe the system of modern medicine? Is it allopathic? Because you mentioned it before. Is that what we would consider modern medicine?
Exactly. So modern medicine is built on the philosophical ideology of allopathy. It was actually Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, that coined that word. It was actually used as a criticism, but then they adopted it, which is really interesting. So allopathic medicine. Allo means opposite. Pathy means suffering or disease, pathology. So in allopathic medicine, what you're doing is you're treating the symptoms with something opposite of that symptom. Okay, so let's say you have fever, you take anti-fever. You block the fever. If you have a viral infection, you take an antiviral. You're suppressing the viral infection. You have parasites, you have inflammation, you have anti-cough, all the medicines anti-something. Why? Because the whole philosophy is about the suppression of symptoms. As long as we can make that thing go away, regardless of what happens after that, regardless if it suppresses it, you suppress a skin, some sort of rash, and then it goes in, and then now you're getting chronic ear infections. That's a really big pattern in children, for example, right? What's going on there? Well, the skin doctor, the dermatologist, be like, well, I got rid of the skin thing, didn't I? That's what you came to me for. I did a good job. But in the holistic perspective, you made that child worse. And now they have a recurring infection going on. And if those are treated now with antibiotics, right, and other types of suppressive methods, it goes even deeper, usually into the lungs. And then these are kids that get asthma. So there's patterns here that are well recognized for hundreds of years. Right? You can look it up. And I'll send people resources if they like. There's plenty, tomes of stuff, like cases like this being tracked for hundreds of years. And so it's that type of allopathic approach that we're seeing today that's very demonstrative of the age that we're living in. It's just who we are now. This is the modern, so we just suppress nature. We just suppress the expression of our own immune systems as we're trying to fight for balance and for equilibrium. It's like, it's unbelievable. It's like, I'm sure there's a meme that people have seen, but it's like the body gets sick and raises the temperature, and then the person takes Tylenol or paracetamol, and then, which is a fever reducer, right? It's anti-inflammatory. And then the meme is like, guys are going like this, kind of like, what do you, like, it's the body going like this, right? It's like, what are you doing? Like, I need that fever to work. Why are you going against me? Why are you weakening me? And so allopathic medicine is built on the doctrine of the other, on suppression, on reductionism, that if I can just, all of health is happening right here. If I can just suppress the symptom, I've done my job and I've done a good job, right? Not seeing the whole. And homeopathy and naturopathy, you're healing with nature. And that's not really very clear about what its role is, but homeopathy is treating with the same. Homeo, homo, same, similar. So we're treating with the similar, and that's a whole other conversation. And maybe we can have another whole talk about homeopathy, because homeopathy is amazing. And I believe one of the major and most important crystallizations of hikmah in the world today. I totally believe that. But allopathic medicine is the modern medicine philosophy.
Okay. So I guess we can compare and contrast some medical principles in the traditional and allopathic systems. We can start by explaining, Dr. Mazen, what is Fitra? Do these systems work with our Fitra or against it? What is it, and does it work with or against it? I think you kind of just answered that, but
yeah, the Fitra is a big question, but basically it's our innate nature, it's our innate purity. We're born on Fitra. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kullu mawludin yuladu ala al-fitra," that every child is born in this Fitra, this pure state of wholeness, of health, of vitality. That's how I would describe it or define it.
Okay.
And so what we want to do is be able to use medicines to live, have a lifestyle, have a deen, and have a lifestyle, and have a culture, and have an education system, and a financial system, an economic system, and a political system, and a medical system that works to optimize the fitra, right? So, for example, you have systems in finance that are anti-fitra, using riba. This is haram, anti-fitra, right? And this creates a number of different social ills that affect the social body as well as the individuals making up that social body, right? So these are all these systems. Allopathic medicine is just one branch of this system, right? Of anti-fitra materialism and reductionism. And so we want to be able to bring harmony back to the fitra, to bring people back to health. Health comes from a word, Old English word, health, which means whole. Health is to become whole again, to become at one with your fitra, right? These are things that have been lost on the Muslims. We just use them as like slogans and bumper stickers. Like we don't really understand it anymore. And we don't understand the way back home. Like, where's the road? Like, we don't understand. Like, we talk about it abstractly, but we don't know, we don't see the line that connects us now to that thing and how to actually journey there and what to do on the way to help us get closer to that goal of fitra, of tawheed, of oneness within us, which is what health is. The more integrated you are, the more whole you are, the more healthy you are, and the closer you are to Allah. Inna Allaha witra, yuhibbul witra. That very Allah Ta'ala is one, and He loves those who are one with themselves and one with Him.
Right.
So this is imperative. So you can't eat well, you can't not eat well and be working towards fitra. Like, you can't be eating junk food. You know this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't be not praying and getting closer to fitra. I mean, we all have our struggles, and may Allah make easy for us our struggles. We're all journeying here, right? We're all in progress. There's no shame. But we have to be clear on the way. We have to be clear on the guidance, on the path. It's bayyin. It's manifest and clear. We're not going to come with something new in the 15th century of Hijri. Come on. It's like, for God's sake.
So
why are we arguing about this?
So what is the precautionary principle in allopathy?
What is
the precautionary principle?
What do you mean by that?
It's a principle that it's used in allopathy from my understanding. I don't really have a way to explain it since it's not my field. But
yeah, I'm not sure what you're trying to ask. Precautionary principle.
I'm trying to come up with an example, kind of live. It's let me see. Maybe we can move on to the next question until maybe it gets connected to something else. So what is the, I guess you were going on to nutrition a little bit, and since I'm a nutrition, I just want to touch base that because I have a few questions which also, but that just is a different topic. What is the role of nutrition in both the allopathic system and the traditional medicine systems? Because there's what is the role of nutrition?
Well, the role of nutrition in allopathic medicine is basically non-existent, unfortunately. They don't get any training, and there isn't any space clinically to even bring it in. Like, for example, my father is a cardiologist. And God bless him. He's a very good cardiologist. He's a good doctor. And he does his best with his patients. But for example, with heart health, we know, all of us know, he knows too, that diet is vital. Diet is essential, right? He'll maybe give general recommendations around avoiding cholesterol and sorts of things, which are maybe perhaps antiquated teachings at this point. But he'll try to give certain recommendations. I think it's a handout. But there isn't this robust kind of inquiry into the lifestyle of the patient. There isn't a robust teaching going on where he's clarifying what kinds of foods exactly he should be eating, or the patient should be eating or not eating, avoiding. There isn't a type of like holistic lifestyle regimen that the doctor is teaching and inviting the patient, because you cannot heal without changing the lifestyle and sustain healing. in health. You cannot. I'll even go as far as to say you cannot heal anything with suppression, with pharmaceutical suppression. You can manage the symptom. You can make it manageable, take the edge off the pain, but you cannot heal the underlying causes with suppression. It's a whole other level, right? It's a whole other level. So unless there's like a pharmaceutical with micronutrients and vitamin D and vitamin C, maybe, which is not a pharmaceutical anymore, it's a nutraceutical.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe then, and those functional med doctors that are doing that are getting closer, right? They're recognizing that. But still not close enough, I would argue, but they're getting closer. But in some way, like pharmaceutical medicine cannot heal. It only takes the edge off. It can stabilize a very acute situation. That's the place. It's a high force intervention in acute care. That's the glory. That's the wisdom. That's the rahmah. That's why it exists for us. Allah gave it to us as a gift. It has a place. Absolutely. No one's saying otherwise. But this mass reliance on suppression, right, and giving out like candy, and the industry and the lobbies around it, and now the corporate takeover of these systems and their products are insidious, are satanic, and so forth. And they're making us, they're breaking our will, one. And two, they're making us actually physically unhealthy and unhealthier.
Absolutely.
So that's allopathic medicine. What's the role of diet and other medicine? Oh my, it's central. It's the first thing that you do, right? Hakim Harith al-Kaldi, Harith ibn al-Kaldi, he said, al-hamyatu, al-ma'datu, baytu da, wal-hamyatu rasu dawa, that the stomach is the house of illness. It's the root of all illness. And the himya is the head of all treatments. It's the best of all treatments. Himya is the individualized diet, the dietary regimen, which is usually exclusive. Like you're taking out things and focusing on other things. It's a fasting type of regimen. So it's always been understood to be central.
Absolutely.
And it's the first step. I mean, no vitalist of any tradition is worth $1 if they don't ask you about their diet and give you counsel on how to correct it. Wherever you are, you can, go from having McDonald's every single day to once a week. That's improvement. And that person is giving you good counsel, right? Or it's like taking out GMOs, going for organic, eating seasonal, eating for your specific needs, taking out your food intolerances. There's a whole spectrum.
Absolutely.
But that is the first thing. And that's how you build health. And one of the main causes of disease, and we can talk about this at a different time, perhaps, I think it needs its own thing, conversation. One of the causes of disease is a weakened composition of blood and body tissue, which comes from maldigestion and malnutrition.
Yes.
So you're not getting enough nutrients to build the blood, which is the river of life, which then flows through the entire body and feeds every cell and every tissue and supports every physiological function. If you don't do that, if your blood is weak, if you're anemic, not just iron deficient, we're probably deficient in dozens and hundreds of essential nutrients that drive biochemistry. Here's where biochemistry really comes in, right? You can drive the biochemistry of our physiology, right? And there's no biochemical mechanism in the body that's not contingent on and needy for the nutrients in our food, because it's essential, meaning we don't make it, we need it. Essential, it's essential for us to consume it.
Absolutely.
That's what makes it essential.
I tell people, like, you're a spiritual creature on a physical journey. And because you're in this physical journey, you're from the earth and you need the nutrients that come from the earth, feeds you through these plants. Like, this is where you need it. It's so vital. Oh my goodness. But yeah, as you were saying, it's probably one of the first steps in your healing process is to change how you eat. So we have nutritionists, and usually a good doctor, a good naturopath, a good physician is going to always refer you and give you some sort of dietary change, something that needs to come out, something needs to be replaced, some testing, etc. If we're not questioning what we're eating, we're not stepping into the journey of healing. because I know that I read a lot of Imam al-Ghazali's work, and basically the gist of one of his books, which is Disciplining the Two. It's right here behind me. It's the red one. Yes. So he says, and basically the gist of it is that all of your desires come from the stomach. So everything, your thought processes, the way you feel about things, your emotions, your energy, everything comes from what goes into your stomach. That's where it all begins. Absolutely. Right, which is why we fast, which is why we, and I think people are very neglectful of that. So they're running to something like a vaccine, they're running to something like a Tylenol, and not looking at what they're putting in their body and what reaction their body's having to what's going in, right? So
I've heard the great American scholar, Dr. Omar Farooq Abdullah, say so much regarding the connection between the spiritual and the dietary specifically. He says good character, which is the peak of spirituality, right? The peak of spirituality is good character. He says good character begins in the stomach.
Absolutely. 100%.
Beautiful, right? That's hikmah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's 100% hikmah.
MashaAllah. That's amazing. All right, so we're gonna kind of shift here to a different topic because we have so much to cover, but we're almost there. So I think for this question is for Sheikh Abdullah.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, in both medical approaches, can the end justify the means? And for example, can you inflict harm if there's going to be a greater good? So basically, can you kill some people in order to save others?
That question has been asked, of course, anciently, with respect to things different than what we're dealing with at the moment, right? And so I think it's important to highlight this because there are a lot of unequal analogies that are floating around in the blogosphere and on the internet, and often you see this analogy made between Muslim jurists and Muslims who are working in the medical field, whereas we say just like we have ijtihad and fiqh, and the person who's not a mujtahid is supposed to follow the mujtahid, and when it comes to specialization and medical knowledge, then you're supposed to just simply listen to those who are experts, right? And so this perhaps can be added on to that another fallacious analogy, because I think the suggestion is that, okay, well, because COVID is so dangerous, supposedly, to the vast majority of people, which is not dangerous to the vast majority of people, then we should be able to force healthy people to take medicine, which actually may turn into poison for them, right? And by giving them medicine, they don't need it, but we're going to make them take it anyway, even though there's no guarantee that it won't spread. And it won't infect those who are more vulnerable, right, among the population. Ghazali, for instance, in talking about the matter of jihad, he posed the question of, let's say if a group of Muslims were being held captives and by the enemy, as used as human shields by the enemy, the opposing army. And the only way in this particular battle, the decisive battle, right, that Muslims need to achieve, they need to win now in order to completely win the battle, right? Would it be lawful for a person or for the army, the Muslim army, to actually kill all the enemies, right, including the Muslim captives that they actually were holding, right? Ghazali's opinion was that, sure, yes, right, because of the greater benefit, right, and the warding off the greater harm of the other opposing army. And of course, this is something which is easier for you to judge because you're talking about something you can physically see, and you're talking about spreading a certain type of governance over people, but when we start talking about things in the unseen realm, in the bacterial viral realm, right, and we're saying that, okay, this is comparable to what Imam Ghazali was talking about, and Ghazali, this is his opinion, right, on the issue. It's not Islam, right, per se. It is Imam Ghazali's his opinion, his ethical opinion about the issue. And there are others that had similar opinions in that particular regard, which eventually also led them to use these sort of examples as justification for suicide bombings, right? So we have to be very careful when we start to utilize these type of analogies, right? So, and I don't believe that it's the same situation. This is not the waqa. This is not the lived reality. This is not what's actually happening on the ground, right? It's something like this, where, there is, again, this extremely, dangerous pathogen, right? And it's dangerous for the vast majority of people, right? And the only way to save the vast majority of us, we have to sacrifice a minority of us, right? And in this case, the sacrifice would be by forcing the minority who refuse to get vaccinated to be vaccinated, right? In order to save the vast majority of people, when actually the vast majority of people are not actually at risk of dying from the pathogen itself, the virus, right? And I just want to come back to a couple of things. I mean, alhamdulillah, I planned today just to learn from Dr. Mazen. I would say that I said to myself, this is his day to really explain to the audience, the viewers, the importance of his practice in this particular science. The ulama, historically, Muslim scholars, they studied everything, right? It wasn't only Islam, right? And this is one of the problems today, is that we talk a lot about specialization, right? And of course, there was definitely apprenticeship, that existed, But the scholars may have not always been practitioners of medicine, but all of them studied medicine, right? And not only prophetic medicine, they studied medicine, right? And this is why you can find books like Ibn Qayyim Jawziyya. There's also Abdurrahman Ibn Jawzi, for instance, has a book called At-Tib al-Ruhani. Abu Bakr al-Razi, also one of the more famous metaphysicians and medical experts, right, has a similar book, same title, At-Tib al-Ruhani. I'm almost certain Ghazali also has a book by the same title, right? And in other words, in that period, in the pre-modern period, the theologians pretty much did everything, right? They studied everything. And this wasn't only the case in the Muslim world. This was in Europe, is in other parts of the world as well. They called them men of letters, right? So for instance, Benjamin Franklin was not only a statesman, he was an inventor, he was an economist, he was a theologian. It was people, they just did everything, right? Whatever was available, there was limited sources. A lot of people read the same ancient works, right, on these different topics, right? And so what the allopathic medicine that people practice today in this particular this paradigm itself, it couldn't exist had the traditional holistic paradigm not already contributed to everything that it builds upon, right? So to an extent, you probably can even claim, and of course, Dr. Mazen can correct me here, that a large contributing factor to what has led to this particular paradigm taking over has been technology, right? And so in that sense, we have an increased knowledge of certain things that we were not able to detect before because of technology, not necessarily a new type of science developing, right? Just the means to actually discern what actually exists and what actually is happening, right? Like microscopes, et cetera, and other types of devices, right? And again, I can be corrected if there's something that's been left out there. But again, just coming back to the original question about whether or not you can harm a minority of the people in order to save the majority, right? And some scholars would say, yes, you can. But the real question is whether or not we're living in that particular circumstance where harming the minority actually is justified, right? And I would say, no, there's no evidence that that's what we're living right now.
Sorry, I was muted there. All right. So I guess so Dr. Fauci recently said, he said, we have to put the communal responsibility ahead of individual preferences. So the question from that is there a precedent in traditional or allopathic medicine of taking responsibility for the health of other people? That's for Sheikh Abdullah, sir.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, well, Dr. Fauci also is on record saying that if his experiments in the lab would lead to a pandemic and lead to the deaths of many people, that the scientific information that we would learn from that would actually be worth the sacrifice, right, of that type of experiment, right? So he himself is definitely not the right person to start talking about weighing talking about sacrificing your individual freedoms and other things for the benefit of the community, right? Because he never really cared about community to begin with, based upon his own declarations. And another question is, when has governments actually really cared about the well-being, right? I mean, on this level, like all of a sudden, just out of the blue, governments around the world care about our health, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't stop us from smoking, they didn't stop us from drinking. Even still now, they're not encouraging us to exercise. They're not encouraging us to eat right. The only thing they're encouraging us to do right now is to get vaccinated and lock down, right? Protect the vulnerable, right? Even though the recommendations and remedies that they're offering us are not protecting the vulnerable. They're not even protecting the unvulnerable, those who are not really vulnerable to death from the COVID virus. You see, so I'm sorry. I think I went off. You asked a question, but that's sort of what brought it out of me. What was the original question?
The original question is there a precedent in traditional or allopathic medicine of taking responsibility for others' health? I guess even Dr. Mazen can weigh on this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that there's definitely that precedent, because, for instance, the Prophet Muhammad SAW talked about the importance of when there's a plague, that those who actually are inside, who are actually in the area where a plague exists, should not go out, and those who are outside of it should not go in, right? And that in itself fundamentally can be taken as a recommendation to protect, oneself, but also protect others, who may not be in the area where the plague exists. Now, in our situation, we're talking about plague, which, apparently we say is spread around the entire planet, so there's really nowhere to go in or out of. So it's everywhere, right? So it's really, lockdowns are senseless, right? Based upon that, and when people advance this hadith as evidence for lockdowns, and I say to them, no, it's again, another false equivalency. It's an unequal analogy that, when it's everywhere, there's nowhere to go out of, and there's nowhere to go into, because it's already there. Right. So that hadith has no meaning with respect to what we are dealing with at the moment. And so, but again, if we had the ideal circumstances, then sure, we could say that we want to, if you are sick, then you don't expose another individual to your illness, right? But in the situation we're dealing with is that we're basically saying that, or assuming that everyone is sick, right? And right, so everyone needs to quarantine him or herself in their home or in their city or in their country, right? So it's an unequal analogy once again. So, but as always, I'll always say that again, if we have the ideal circumstances, then sure, you can make the argument, but we're not living in the circumstances wherein those type of teachings can be applied. And Dr. Mazen, I'd like to hear from him as well.
Yeah, would you like to weigh in on that?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is there a precedent in traditional or allopathic medicine of taking responsibility for other people's health?
Nothing comes to mind. I was thinking about it too. Nothing comes to mind as an example beyond what the Sheikh already mentioned.
Okay. So I guess a separate question for you is, are traditional medicine practitioners susceptible to the conflict of interest and the pressure and propaganda that we're seeing today? Because we know that the MDs are definitely susceptible to that. Are you seeing the same in the traditional medicine practitioner area?
Yeah, of course. People are people. The
Yeah.
nafs is the nafs, right? There's always that potential for self-deception, for vulnerability to self, promotion, and whatever, taking in incentives and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. So I'm going
So
to take
yeah,
a couple.
I guess in some way, if I can say though, with that said, the vitalistic practitioners of the world today are not the ones that are lobbying politicians. They're not the ones heading billion dollar corporations. Our medicines cost a few dollars. We work oftentimes in the shadows, helping people who have been abused and spat out by the system. We don't really have much power in the first place. Even if we were to have I guess some people potentially can abuse their power with individuals that they interface with, right? But we're talking about propaganda. We're talking about mass psychosis and conflict of interest at a mass top down kind of level. There's nothing really like that nowadays. Maybe in the past when the dominant systems of medicine were traditional, maybe that happened. I don't know, right? Maybe they competed with one another. I can see that. You can see in the mid 19th century there was a lot of back and forth between, for example, the hygiotherapy people who actually developed the first 4-year medical school in America in, I think, 1853 in New York. They call it the Hygiotherapy and Hygiene Institute. The New York Hygiotherapy and Hygiene Institute was the first 4-year medical school program in the U.S., which are pretty much the proto naturopaths, if you will, because that came beginning of the 20th century. 1905 was when it was first naturopathic medicine was made into an actual school by Dr. Benedict Lust. Anyways, so maybe back then there was more they had more weight, right? But now it's more like this individual person that lies to themselves and tries to get ahead in a certain way, but it's not something that we're talking about at the scale of what's happening now with allopathic medicine and cahoots with big pharma and lobby and Senate and all these things. There's no way. It's not even on the same page.
Yeah, it's sort of like the pot calling the kettle black. We have these suggestions that the only reason that these homeopaths are coming out against allopathic medicine is because there's a profit incentive, and they say, well, I mean, your whole industry is built upon profit incentives and conflicts of interest, and you're the one making all the big cash, right? So if the principle is that if an individual can make a profit from selling herbs or selling an alternative medicine which is not patented that people believe will actually will work, then big pharma already won that battle, right? And they themselves have already been incriminated, but because of all of the billions, perhaps even trillions that they've made now, off of the things that they sold. Right? So I'm sorry to cut you off, Dr. Mazen. I just had to. I can't help. I have to get that out.
No, exactly. So it's not a comparison really to make. Honestly, it's really not. Are there foul players on both sides? Yeah, of course. Humans are humans, right? Again, it's not like a wow thing to say. It's not even like a wow revelation for me to make or like a statement to make. It's not quotable. It's obvious. It's self-evident. People are people, and people will make bad choices and hurt people and abuse people and sometimes even deceive themselves, and that's a problem. But it's just a whole different level, orders of magnitude, more insidious is the conventional system and its darkness.
So speaking of this propaganda, there is a question here from one of our watchers. They're saying, question for speaker. So either of you can answer us. My family asked me, how can all doctors in the world be part of a conspiracy? That's not possible. How do you explain to them that they're not being told the truth about it?
Yeah, exactly. They're not part of the conspiracy.
Right.
It's like when you have commanders for war, and they're meeting in the war room, and there's like 5 guys, the 5 generals, and and the king, and then you have like the soldiers outside getting drunk, and it's like those guys are actually going to war. And if you will, I'm talking, I guess I was watching a movie that the soldiers being drunk. Whatever, they're playing and eating and leisure, and they have no idea what's going on in the war room, right? So similarly, the doctors are really kind of like the last, like they're like the common folk kind of in terms of operationalizing these plans that these have. Yeah. The conspiracy is in the war room. It's not the people on the front, these doctors and stuff like that, like my father and my friends who are MDs and so forth. Like that's not them. If anything, what I'm trying to do with this whole conversation is to shake them up, because many of them know better and they can begin to see, and they're either ignoring what they're seeing or they're insisting that they're not seeing it, right? But it's like, it's this ignorance, right? It's this kind of either ignorance, jahal, or jahal murakkab, compound ignorance that we need to kind of wake people up from. But it's not, they're not in on it. They're not the shayateen here, right? It's a top-down thing, and it's trickling down, and the last kind of level are these doctors, and they just happen to be doing the groundwork, right? And being the yes men, unfortunately, right? They're the yes men, and they don't inquire deeper. And it's not even like the conspiracy, it's been going on for a long time. I mean, from our perspective, for example, like this pharmaceutical suppression harming patients, and the iatrogenic cause of disease, which is people dying and getting ill from medical care, which is the second or third most common cause of death in the US, is iatrogenic disease, right? So this is a big problem, and it's been a problem for a long time, for decades. But now, because of the nature of what's going on and the pandemic and the agenda around it, these doctors are being used, and they should know very well that they're being used, right? They're not, and they should know they're being used because they can't practice what they know. Firstly, I mean, they've been used for a long time. It's not even a pandemic thing, right? They've been used to push pills, to ignore lifestyle, to not look at what, if they were really curious, what amazing things vitalistic doctors are doing every day. They have no idea. I mean, you get people coming in, like I was told by my doctor that I'm untreatable, I have a terminal disease. And then people come out of that all the time, regularly. It's not uncommon. It's really more on about the compliance. If you're a good doctor, then it's really about just like making the changes and taking the medicines. These things work, but they're so engrossed that there's nothing but these drugs. And the way I have to practice is this golden standard of care that's being basically upheld by the insurance companies, because the insurance companies won't pay reimbursement back to the hospitals if they don't practice it the exact certain way. So if you get this patient coming in with a certain clinical picture, you have to work it up a certain way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 imaging, labs, 5-minute, intake, and then you have protocols. If it fits these categories, then you just give this pill. And if they're maybe allergic to that, if they're like penicillin or whatever, you give a different antibiotic, you make some adjustments, you individualize it, just so they don't like die, basically. And it takes off the edge, and you do your job and you get paid. But what if there's something new, like there's a great herbal formula for that specific thing that has no side effects and will clear it in days, right? Forever. Unless they don't change their underlying habits and stuff that caused it in the first place. And it'll come back, but then if you take it again, it'll help it again. But the idea is to teach them to heal themselves internally. But anyways, that doctor can't go and learn from the naturopath what he's doing about that same exact case and begin to incorporate it, because he won't get paid for it, and he's liable to lose his job and maybe his license. So they're yes men to big pharma, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry, it's a bitter pill to swallow. I give a lot of bitter medicine though, and I have some
Absolutely. That kind of leads into this question here, because this is a hot one, and I've gotten a lot of DMs on Instagram. But here we go. So many of us around the world are finding it increasingly difficult to avoid the vaccine. What is the greater benefit or harm? Should we take the vaccine with confidence in dua that Allah that Allah can remove the harms, or should we not take the vaccine and potentially not be able to perform Hajj or earn livelihood?
That is the question.
Yeah, it is.
That is the question. And it's not a question that I feel comfortable giving a prepackaged answer to.
Yeah.
Honestly, here's where I say, La adri. I don't know exactly what's best in that situation, in that circumstance. My inclination, personally, is to avoid it for now. I'm avoiding it personally. But people have different circumstances. People have different risk factors. People have different social constraints that they're experiencing. And there's no prepackaged remedy here or answer, right? It has to be met. And in some way, I've been inviting everyone who asked me that question is, of course, to pray about it, but to, you have to employ agency. Like, you have to feel unforced by it. It's really important that you don't feel forced, that you make your own decisions about it. And that's perhaps, I believe, the best way to ensure a positive outcome, regardless of what you choose. You, inshallah ta'ala, optimize the best outcome by making dua to Allah and then choosing it with full agency and determination and azima. And just trust and believe, and don't feel forced and compelled and broken by someone else's forcing and mandating upon you. There's something inherently dissociative and disease forming psychologically and the body mind, psychosomatically, then body mind, when you feel infringed on, when you're transgressed, when you're oppressed, and you have to fragment yourself. And I can't choose. I'm being forced and chained. There's a pressure, there's a noose around your neck. You feel, I'm not human. I can't make my own decisions. I feel like a child. I feel like a slave. There's something about that psychologically. So I've been telling people, and I put on a video, alhamdulillah, where I'm just like, you choose. I have my preference. You might have your preference, but circumstances may be different. And you should get to a point, regardless of what you choose, that you're totally in submission to Allah. And just like, at some point I even joke, like, if you're going to go take the vaccine, not recommending it, unless you're of a certain category of people that it seems to be more indicated for. I don't think the questioner was of that category. But if they are, the joke was, I tell people, take the vaccine, and just like, you take it and say, give that to me. I'll take it myself. Kind of thing. Like, you're not going to give it to me. You're not going to take it against my will. Like, give it against my will. I will just take it. That's the state, like minimum kind of state I've been inviting people to consider. Because that way, psychologically, you're not being broken. And a lot of this is, we talk about this mass psychosis, right? Mm-hmm. It's this psychological game. It's a psycho-spiritual game. Mm-hmm. And that's the real game being played. Because even if let's say there's nothing in this vaccine, which I don't agree with, but let's say there's nothing in this vaccine that's harmful to our nature. What happens to the next batch or the next pandemic in 5 years or whatever, when this precedent has been set and they're putting whatever they want in there, right? So that's what I'm thinking about. So right now, I think this may be a dress rehearsal. Allahu A'lam, right? There's probably more of this to come. They know now they can do it. This is all dress rehearsal.
And I think
it's a psycho-spiritual piece that's so important here. Like, you have to be at peace with whatever you choose and know that it doesn't have any power except that Allah gives it that power.
Absolutely.
Influence. It has no power at all. It's totally inert, in fact. And if you believe in some way that's going to harm you, this is the inverse of the placebo effect. It's called the nocebo effect. That if you believe it's going to harm you, you'll harm yourself. Yeah.
So I guess, Sheikh Abdullah, if you can weigh on this in an aspect of the way I see it personally is like this whole idea of Muslims, like right off the bat from the very beginning, oh, there's a vaccine, I have to go to Hajj anyway, let me just go ahead. That kind of attitude, it's very different from a person who, hey, you're under duress and we're taking everything from you and you have to take it. It's very different. Those are two different attitudes, two different situations. What about the test that Allah is placing on people as it comes to also, I don't even know if I can touch this subject here, but the people who control your permissions and your ability to perform Hajj in the first place. Another question I had last night was, I'm going to be responsible for not going to Hajj. And I was like, but the people that are preventing you and are forcing you are also, they're responsible for that. So there's a whole mixture here when it comes to this question of Hajj. And it bothers me that if people are just like, hey, I'm a Muslim, I have to go anyway, so let me just go ahead and get started now. Why put up a fight? Why, speak for myself or advocate for myself if I have to do it anyway? What do you have to say on that?
Yeah, Hajj is compulsory if you're able to do so, right? If you have the capacity to do it. It's not compulsory just because, it's compulsory, right? In other words, this is contingent upon what's called istita'a, right? And usually when we talk about istita'a, we're okay, safe travel, the path is safe, you're not sick, etc. Those type of things, right? But what's happened now is that a new condition has been placed upon Hujjaj, on the pilgrims themselves, which is that in order for you to enter the city, being a Muslim is insufficient, right? It used to be, if you're a Muslim, you can enter the city, perform the Hajj, perform Umrah. Now, in order for you to enter the city, you have to be Muslim, and you also have to take the jab, right? One of the jabs, which could potentially harm you, right? So it's the responsibility of the governors are the ones who are sinful, right? In this case, for you not going to Hajj, not you, right? Is that because you have the freedom to refuse? They don't have the right to compel you to put in your body something you don't want in your body, right? So it's their problem. They're the ones who are sinful, right? In this situation, it's not you who are sinful for doing that. And then the other part is that Hajj is not like, not having food to eat, right? When you're starving, you understand? So this idea, okay, well, I'm doing it because of necessity, right? Because if I don't do it, then I'm going to starve. No, it's not the same, right? حفظ الأبدان مقدم على حفظ الأديان. So the preservation of your bodily integrity is preferred over the preservation of your religion, right? According to the vast majority of ulama, right? So this is a basic maxim that we learned, right? So this is why we say to people that, okay, if you're starving, you eat pork, if that's all you have available, right? If you're choking and the only thing in front of you is wine, then drink the wine to clear up your throat, right? So, but this is not the same sort of situation. Again, so there's always these unequal analogies that people throw out there, right? That is misleading people. And then the other part of it too is that I think that a lot of Muslims are just not aware of just the degree or the level of brainwashing, right, that has been at play, right? And even I'll be very honest with you that I didn't realize how significant it was until the past few years myself. Right? I always had a distrust in the media and the establishment, we call, right? But it was only in recent years, over the past few years, I come to realize just how significant the brainwashing has become. And so if a person, again, we're already accustomed to getting vaccines. You say, well, certain vaccines you're supposed to get anyway when you go to school, etc. Right? Hey, it's just a new vaccine. That's all. We already get the flu vaccine, so why not? It's just another vaccine. But people don't know anything about the technology and this new type of use. Of course, it's been around for a few decades, the technology, but it's never been used in this way. We've never seen what it does to human being long term and on this massive scale is a big experiment. We are guinea pigs, in this big experiment. And this is why, they don't know how many shots do you need. If we knew so much about it, you wouldn't keep changing. Okay, well, we might need a third shot. Oh, we might need a fourth shot. Oh, we might need a fifth shot. Say, well, I thought it was already proven that it works and it's safe and is effective, right? That's what they told us, right? But they keep changing. It keeps changing. Fully vaxxed means you have 2 shots. Now fully vaxxed means you need 3 shots. Then it's going to be fully vaxxed means you have 4. You have to have 5 shots, right? So when does it stop? It doesn't stop at all, right? And that is what many of the leaders of what some call, like we call it the Great Reset, say, like Klaus Schwab at the beginning of his book, he says it. He said people are asking when do things go back to normal, and my answer is never. He says that right at the beginning of his book. COVID-19, the Great Reset, right? So, and he even acknowledges at the end of his book, because I read it cover to cover. At the end of his book, he acknowledges that COVID-19 is not really that serious of a pandemic. He says it's not really as serious as people think it is. He said, especially if you compare it to other pandemics that have occurred, it's not that big of a deal. But we're going to take full advantage of it. We're going to take full advantage of this opportunity to bring into what he calls the Great Reset or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, right? So there's a lot of big things happening. The people can be in denial all they want to, right? This is not merely a medical crisis, right? This is something way greater than a medical crisis that's happening, and they've utilized a rather benign virus in order to bring about all of these significant changes that they're trying to make to the world economy, among other things, and we have to be very much awake to this, right? So we can think that we're going back to normal if we just conform, but it's not going to happen. We thought that was going to go back to normal if we did what they said do after 9/11, right? And taking off our shoes and our clothes, and we go through the checkpoints at the airports. It's still the same way, right? They're not going to give it back. It's going to be this way. This will be the new normal, as they call it. They call it the new normal, new normal, and they want to build back better, right? That is their call, right? They use that all the time. So it's and again, I apologize. Like a lot of times, I hear the questions, I read the questions, and I have the tendency to not answer them directly because I have this tendency to sense that the questioner is sort of imagining things to be other than a way different than what they actually are, So, and I have to push back against the assumption that that we live under these ideal conditions and we can just trust government. Listen, these are the same governments that killed hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, who killed thousands of Afghans, right? Who killed thousands of Muslims, and they've oppressed people in South America and Central America. I mean, these are the same people, right? The same people, who make you unhealthy, right? Who haven't protected you, from things as like drugs and cigarette and wine and things like that. And all of a sudden now you actually believe that they really are concerned about your health. Okay, if you do, I said, be my guest to your own detriment. And I'm sorry to, sort of, I know we're supposed to be talking about, and we have.
It needs to be said. This needs to be said. I can't tell you how many times we get that question over and over and over. It's really important that people understand what's really going on here. But going back then to the topic, just to wrap everything up, we're hitting at 2 hours almost. So this question is for both of you. So either of you can step in and kind of just bounce it from each other. So how do Muslim doctors, how are they going to reconcile the two systems? Should they be practicing traditional or modern medicine?
Okay. They should be practicing medicine, period, as it is, as it always was, the original medicine, as it's been since time immemorial, and which Wahi corroborates. Like this rational, principled, vitalistic, holistic medicine. That's the invitation always. It's like, what do you recommend? Should we be on Tawheed or should we be pagan? Come back to Tawheed. Come back to the original teaching. Come back to a teaching that respects nature and respects man, capital M, and ontologically, cosmologically, theologically, naturally. These are things that are non-negotiable as far as I'm concerned. Here's where the nuance comes in, because people now are probably thinking, oh my God, this guy's a wacko. What do you mean practicing? I'm an MD, I'm an allopath, I'm an endocrinologist, I am an oncologist, I am a surgeon. How am I supposed to practice holistic medicine? Fair enough. In some capacity, I'm not speaking, actually not in capacity, in essence, I'm not speaking in terms of interventions. You can keep practicing your interventions, right? Because you can totally practice pharmaceutical medicine and surgery as a holistic hakim. And I've mentioned perhaps in the past, I'll say it again, we're trained for 1 year total in pharmaceuticals in naturopathic medical school. And in certain states, I can prescribe and de-prescribe. I cannot in Illinois. I cannot treat, prescribe, or de-prescribe in Illinois. But in 26 other states in America, I'm licensable, depending on the state statutes, right? So we're trained that way, and we're trained to suture and do minor surgery and stuff like that. Tamam? And it's on our board exams and everything. So the whole idea is not that you just go from suturing with sutures or giving medications to now applying essential oils on the skin and changing diet. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in your philosophy, in your approach, in your, if you will, clinical aqidah, the way that you envision practice, the way that you assess the case, that you think about the case, the way that you prescribe intervention, the way that you would refer to people at some point, because you identify this is beyond my scope, and you need to go to this person who is more well versed in the interventions that you need at this level, because you don't need me. You're more in a chronic state, for example. Cardiologist comes in, I have chronic issues, whatever. Go to the cardiologist, go to the naturopath, and they'll help you heal and return back health and vitality. That's their job. That cardiologist, their role in life, the hikmah and the meaning of their life is like in those acute situations. Person comes in with a heart attack. They come in with a stroke, right? How can we stabilize this very acute situation now with whatever we have? And then once they're stable, you discharge them from the hospital and with a referral letter to a naturopath or a homeopath or an Ayurvedic practitioner that can help them make the changes they need to restore vitality and strength constitutionally and address the underlying root causes that brought them to the emergency room in the first place, right? That's how you integrate it. But you can't have two opposing paradigms. It has to be one paradigm, right? That's how you integrate it. This is the real medicine. Sorry, not sorry. This is the original medicine. You can't really have another approach. This is the holistic approach. And then it takes into consideration the totality of the patient, and then it can make the call as to who needs to see them and who's more important and who has the tools and who has the approach, and right? Like that's where we can reconcile it. It's doctors recognizing, and Muslim doctors specifically, practicing what they know clinically, professionally, that they know, they believe in the oneness of Allah, they believe in the ruh, they believe in the wholeness of the human being, ruh, jism, nafs. There's all this huge integration, and they're working with that. And there's underlying causes that are spoken of in Tib al-Nabawi and the Sunnah at large, negative thinking and poor eating, and I mean, there's so many things we can go into. It's so beautiful. The Sunnah goes into like eating with your right hand and eating with your left and basic hygiene and all of that. It's all part of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
But it's not so much this, you become like me. You become a holistic, whatever. No. You can stay in the hospital. You can still practicing what you're doing. I mean, I would imagine it would look a little bit different once you learn the philosophy and learn a little bit more about how you can begin to help these people. You might become a hakim, and but you can still use medicine. And it's not you don't have to let go of everything, and you don't have to become a heretic to people around you. And It's not like that. It's not this binary. Again, I'm not here to challenge, force change of the paradigm. We want to heal the paradigms. We want to bring it back into balance, right? It's this balance, thinking the person as a machine with separate parts that get broken, and then using strong medicine, synthetic medicine with lots of side effects. I mean, even the whole idea of side effects is crazy. It's not a side effect. It's a main effect. You're just marketing the one effect that you want of those 10 effects it has on our physiology. You're marketing the one that you want. It's not side effects. They're affecting the whole body. That's what you do, because the whole body's connected. So you give a medicine and it affects the whole. Duh. Come on. But you're marketing it as a drug medicine, or this is this is a diabetes medicine, or whatever medicine. But it has all these inconvenient, the side effects. What are you talking about? Like it can't be any other way. Like you just have to, use that knowledge and take it one step further. Okay. So how do I begin to help this person? How can I get that goal of helping this person either tamper down the symptom or restore balance without hurting them further? Oh, there's a herbal natural correlate to this synthetic pharmaceutical, which actually derived from, that I can give with no side effect or marginal side effects depending on the dosing. Because a lot of side effects come from dosing, right? The poisons in the dose, as Paracelsus, the great Hakim, I would argue, said, the poison is in the dose. So you can, even with herbs, you can kill people. Like it's not like it's this benign thing that you're giving, right?
Absolutely.
But you can give it in a way that serves the function without harming the patient. Yes. This is hikmah. This is available. This is widely known. We've had it for thousands of years. Why are you ignoring it? It becomes not only jahil, but kind of kibr. I mean, it's a problem. Arrogance, pride, There's a lot you need to learn, that you can learn, that you should learn. Welcome. There's no shame. Come on, come home. This is the original medicine. Come on.
Absolutely. 100%. So Dr. Mazen, do you have one book recommendation that doctors should read to sum up this entire topic, our conversation? Or at least get them, take your information.
One book?
One. It's tough, I know.
One book? Can I give two? Let's do, okay, I'll do one book, fine. I like, Nature Cure by Henry Lindlar. Henry Lindlar, who's considered like the mujaddid of naturopathic medicine. He lived in the 1920s and 30s. Very interesting man, believer in God. And he has crystallized a lot of hikmah, if not, all of hikmah. But, I won't say all of hikmah, a lot of hikmah. And I think it's a good place to start for Western readers.
Excellent. So, Sheikh Abdullah, do you have any closing thoughts if people want to learn more about this topic?
Yeah, I would say that a major source, I think, is of the crisis, this paradigmatic crisis, I think I could say, that we suffer right now, has to do with the shift from the pre-modern to the modern period. And all over the world and the pre-modern period, there was a sense that the human being, first and foremost, was part of nature. The human being was becoming something, or is expected to become something more than what he or she was, right? And that was reflected in the curricula that you found at the different universities, But even if you go back, Aristotle, for instance, he wrote his Ethics, which was concerned with human behavior and excellence in human behavior. But then he wrote his Politics after that, In other words, so the micro was supposed to be, then translated into the macro level, right? So he was like, okay, this is what ethics looks like on the macro level, right? As a politician, as a governor, right? Of a polity, that these are the virtues that you should have in order to effectively rule, right? And of course, theologically, there's some issues, and perhaps even certain ethical positions that not everybody would agree with from Aristotle. But still, there was this idea that society was expected to become something. They believed in the metaphysical, not just the physical. They believed in the metaphysical, right? And in the ancient European universities, the higher sciences were theology, medicine, and law, right? And they were the higher sciences because they were concerned with the health of the human being, right? So theology concerned with the health of the human mind and spirit. Law is concerned with the body politic, or the health of the body politic, right? This of society, right? And medicine itself is concerned with the human body, right? Overall. So there was this sort of a totalizing, or a sort of a meta narrative, right, that people lived under, right? Certain assumptions about human being and human nature. And I think we've lost that today. And unfortunately, many Muslim medical practitioners as well, that they themselves have lost a grip on this. And I think part of it too has to do with the loss of Islamic civilization, or the loss of ascendancy, right, or supremacy of Islamic civilization to the West. And so often when you read the writings of the Muslim reformers, they'll often say that, oh, it's because Western technology, it's because of Western science, it's because Muslims got engrossed in blind following of the schools, and they stopped innovating, etc. We have to, in order to re-achieve, or to reclaim our glorious past, we have to re-embrace these things that were once embraced in our Islamic civilization, right? And so, which means now we have to focus on technology, we have to focus on material pursuits, right? And so the immaterial becomes de-emphasized to the extent that we start to believe that the only thing that can cure us is a vaccine or a jab, right? The only thing is that's the only thing. So Muslims have no reason, no justification, no religious basis for an exemption from having to take the vaccine, right? Even if one would say, well, listen, my religious belief is that God cures, right? And I will put my trust in God, and I will refuse the vaccine. They said, no, not good enough. Not good enough. The only thing that will save us is the vaccine. Nothing else. Not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not praying to God, not doing dhikr, not reciting Quran, right? Which itself is a type of kufr, right? If people don't say that expressly, but that's fundamentally what they're saying, is that my religious objections, right, are unfounded, right? Why? Because these are unquantifiable. We can't quantify dua. We can't quantify dhikr. So you might think that dhikr or dua cured you, but it was probably something else, right? Some other explanatory process happening in your body. And maybe it's because you weren't at much as risk, whatever. But the vaccine really put you over the top. And I said, well, how do you know that? How do you really know that? So those are, I think, the ideas that we think, I think that we should reflect upon, is that all these civilizational revolutions, right? Revolutions in thought, they have had a lasting effect on many of us, and we have to embrace the past. We have to value, right, the contributions of the past, because we didn't get to the present without the past, right? So we can't just think that, okay, because now we have modern technology, modern science, all that old traditional, holistic, homeopathic stuff, traditional medicine, it means nothing anymore. As a matter of fact, we need not be concerned with people's diets, exercise, or any type of preventative things that they could do, right, to keep themselves from being adversely affected by pathogens, right? And then also the idea that, okay, well, if I have a fever, is a bad thing. Well, why is it a bad thing? What makes it a bad thing? Well, isn't my body just simply reacting the way it's supposed to? Right? And of course, I'm speaking as a non-physician, but again, I think it's an obligation upon the non-physician to at least try to understand some of these things, right? Books are available. We have living resources like Dr. Mazen and others that we can learn from, and we shouldn't just simply just dismiss it and then we end up suffering the exploits of other people.
Absolutely. That is, I have a message here it's not on this feed, but it's the sister saying that this conversation just keeps getting better and better. Listening to Sheikh Abdullah is making me realize how important studying logic is and how tragic it is that it's not really taught anymore. People are not thinking anymore, so it's so important. Mashallah. So we are at 2 hours, and I just want to wrap this up. I want to thank both of you for your time and the audience for coming and joining us and being so active in the chats, mashallah. So next week, we are going to have inshallah, Dr. Karim Kandil. I know a lot of you had questions about homeopathy. I mean, the questions were pouring in. We are going to have sessions just dedicated to these things. Okay, so we are noting everything you're asking. I know somebody asked something about the flu. This is something that Dr. Karim can probably help you with. So I'm going to take that question down, and inshallah we'll cover it next week. Now, Dr. Karim Kandil, he studied to be both an MD and an MD, and he will be sharing his insights on this conversation and just going a bit deep into what he's doing and helping us understand the pandemic and things like that. And again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. And let me just put this little ticker down here. So cool. If you have any questions that you didn't get an opportunity to, you're no longer live, you're watching a recording, just submit them to questions@balancingtheconversation.com. And again, we will get to them. We have a lot of episodes coming, inshallah. So we will get to them. And thank you so much. And Sheikh Abdullah, would you like to have a dua for us or give us a dua and so we can close this?
Sure. اللهم إنا نسألك موجبات رحمتك وعزائم مغفرتك وسلامة من كل إثم والغنيمة من كل بر والفوز بالجنة والنجاة من النار. اللهم آت أنفسنا تقواها وزكيها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه الأخيار وسلم تسليما كثيرا. وسبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
السلام عليكم.